This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to share this next guest with you. She joined us for our final webinar on the Whole Horse Apprenticeship this year, and I couldn't help but want to share this with the rest of the world. How she's doing work with horses and the edges she's exploring are incredibly inspiring and mind-blowing, and I know I, for one, can't wait to join her somewhere in the world and start to learn this work more deeply. Here we go. This is the webinar I recorded with Elsa Sinclair, and very excited for you to join in with us now today. So incredibly honored to be here with Elsa Sinclair, who is joining us from Seattle. Elsa is the creative wisdom and amazingness behind the documentary Taming Wild. And I watched the trailer a little while ago and was so blown away by just that sense of presence and centeredness that Elsa carried, and what she was doing with horses, and how she was just really working this cutting edge that I know I'm so fascinated about and I want to learn more about. And she was open to doing this webinar, so I'm just so stoked. And Elsa's going to be talking to us today about something she calls freedom-based training, and how to really develop this sense of choice with our horses. And I, again, I know I'm going to learn a ton from her in this arena, and I think all of us will. So Elsa, I'm so grateful for you to be here. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Whole Horse Apprenticeship.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here and to meet you all.
By the way, everybody, this is Elsa's first webinar.
Yes. So if I do anything wrong, you have to let me know what it is so I can improve.
Because I have a feeling it won't be her last. Yeah. So today, everyone, me and Elsa are just going to have but we're going to have a conversation. We're just going to open up this topic that we've already been sort of chatting about before the webinar here today. And I'm, all of me is tingling with wanting to know more about what Elsa has already shared around. And so why don't we start off, Elsa, with you just giving us a little bit of a summary, if you can, of your journey to this point, and where you kind of came from with horses and where you've kind of gone to, like, just I know that's a hard summary, but a little bit around that.
So long story short,
just let me go.
I love that there are extra animals in this webinar here. That's the best.
All right. Speaking of personal choice, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's going to be nice and quiet. All right.
Okay.
Take two.
All right. So I am, I guess, third generation horse trainer. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather was a horse trainer and my mother was a horse trainer. And I have been working with horses since I was pretty small. And my mom was also a Montessori teacher. So she really believed in letting children teach other children. So if any child knew anything, they would teach the other children in the barn what they knew. And that's how I grew up. So we all grew up teaching each other anything we knew. And she wasn't much in the way of telling us how to do things. She was much more in the way of setting up the environment and then saying, you guys will figure it out. Go play with it and go figure it out. So that was very much my history. And then I studied with lots of different trainers, from dressage to Western to endurance racing to jumping to eventing. I did lots and lots of different things. But at a certain point, I had a horse that had a nervous breakdown. And he was 5 years old, and I had owned him since he was a foal. And my 3-day event trainers at the time said, retire him. He's done. His brain will never come back. He's never going to recover.
Wow.
He was scared of his own shadow. He was scared of everything. And they said, give up. And I didn't want to give up. And so that led me into natural horsemanship. And I did a lot of studying with various natural horsemanship trainers. And I became a teacher, and I taught lots of students what I knew. And then one of my students came along, and she said to me, she said, do horses like being ridden? And I was a horse trainer. And I said, yeah, they love being ridden. And she said, no, I mean, if they weren't entrained to it from birth, if they didn't know horses got ridden, if they weren't surrounded by horses that got ridden, would they want to be ridden? And I said, well, yeah, people bring Mustangs in off the range all the time, and they teach them to be ridden, and they love it. And she said, but those Mustangs, do you think they ever knew they had a choice? And I was stuck. And I still get chills up my arms when I repeat the story.
Yeah.
And so I started doing research, and I wanted to find who had ever given horses a choice. And I found lots of clicker trainers who used food rewards, who considered that a choice. But I wasn't sure if I really considered that a choice, because they had dominion over the food and they could hand it out when they pleased.
Totally.
Was that still a choice? And so with all the research I did, the only person I could find that maybe had gone there is Carolyn Resnick in her book, Naked Liberty. But the thing about Naked Liberty is it was written in such a lovely, flowery way. I wasn't really sure how much of it was reality and how much of it was dream quest.
Yeah, totally.
And I thought, somebody needs to do this in a way that is more reality based. And so I started talking about it to everybody, and everybody said, you should do it. And I said, well, I don't have time, and I don't have money, and somebody said, well, somebody should do it. So I went around talking to all of my horse trainer friends, trying to tell somebody that somebody should do this project.
do this.
And nobody took me up on it. And finally I thought, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I need to do it, because it just needs to be done. Somebody needs to do it. And so I started writing a blog, and more people got interested. I thought maybe my mother would read the blog, but it turned out there were actually hundreds of people that wanted to read the blog. And so I thought, wow, it's more than just me that's interested. Now, all of this time, I thought this was going to be a experiment. I was just going to do this thing for a year, where I would take a wild horse from the range, and I would spend a year with this horse in freedom, where she had all the things she needed. She had freedom, she had friends, she had food, all of them with unlimited supply. I was not in control of any of that. And all I was going to do is show up and be in her space. See what kind of relationship we could build if she had everything she needed and I was only extra. And I was just curious what was going to happen. And my thought was to have my daughter take pictures, who was 10 at the time. And I was going to set up a tripod in the corner of the field to kind of capture what I was doing. And then a really good friend of mine, who's a videographer, said, if you're going to do this, we should do it right and make a movie. All right, how do we do that? And so she told me what camera to buy, and she said she would visit once a month and do the filming. And long story short, the project ended up way more successful than I ever anticipated. And even after I made the movie, I thought, this is beautiful, and I love that I did it, and it's going to be an inspirational movie, but I don't think anybody's actually going to be interested in doing it because it's too slow. And then people said, well, will you teach us a little of it? Will you teach us just a little of what you're doing? And I said, well, sure. It's a fun afternoon. We can do a little slow work for an afternoon. And I started getting reports back that horses that were narcoleptic started sleeping at night and were no longer falling down during the day. And horses that were bullied in the herd all of a sudden weren't getting bullied anymore. And horses that were bullies stopped bullying other horses. And horses that couldn't be caught were meeting their owners at the gate and whinnying. And a story after story after story of really life-changing things. And I thought, wow, maybe this is more useful than I thought. And fast forward to 6 years later, this is now all I do. I travel around the world teaching clinics, and I get story after story after story of what incredible benefits this leads to. Wow. Now, I don't have anybody who's doing it in entirety. So what I did during the year, where I used no tools, no food rewards, it was only my body language, spending time with a horse. I'm the only one I know who've done that in entirety. But what I found is everything I did is incredibly beneficial to everyone I've taught it to.
Beautiful. Wow. What a journey.
Yeah, it's incredible. I had no idea. And it still sort of blows me away every day that this thing that I thought was a lark and it was fun and it was interesting, but I didn't think it would be useful, has turned out to be incredibly useful.
Wow. And I have a couple of questions around that. I mean, I have tons of questions around that, but you know, in this particular sense, I'm like thinking even in terms of your own personal growth through that process. What did you notice about what happened for you?
For me, there was a lot of understanding that was gained about patience. You know, there's that saying that the only constant in life is change, and everything will change. But I think as human beings, we often get very impatient, and because things haven't changed soon enough. And this process has really led me to watch the minute and gentle and gradual changes that we often miss completely because we're so busy looking for the big change.
Absolutely.
So patience becomes the art of noticing the minute. Because you don't really have to be patient if you can notice the smallest signs.
Beautiful. Wow. And you know, you talked about these horses, you know, in workshops really shifting and changing like in really like incredible ways. And as you said, like considering what you were doing, the very small things, what, you know, have you sort of unpacked that? Is there a physiological shift that happens? What's going on for them, do you think?
So in a nutshell, I believe that all of us, horses included, experience levels of stress that are either productive or unproductive. So a productive level of stress makes you feel connected to your herd or your friends. An unproductive level of stress makes you feel separated and alone. And I think that there are two things that lower stress. One of them is leadership, and one of them is movement. Now, there's probably others, but those are the two that have really become apparent for me. And so when I say leadership, I don't necessarily mean the dominant kind of leadership that everybody is taught. What I teach is a different kind of leadership, which I call passive leadership. And Mark Rashid talks about it a lot in his books, but I think he doesn't explain it well enough. And I think that was one of the things that I was really able to delve into a lot when I was filming the movie. So my description of passive leadership is I move my body, but you get to do whatever you want with your body. And how do I move my body in such a way where there is harmony after I make a decision? So when I take a step to the left, does my horse instantly need to make a counter move because they are uncomfortable? Or do they accept my step to the left or move exactly with my step to the left? So my step to the left is a form of leadership. I've made a decision. The horse lets me know whether they accept my leadership by whether they're willing to harmonize with it. If they make a counter move, they have now taken passive leadership. And if I harmonize with them, I have become the follower. Now, if I become the follower, which I do a lot, I let the horse lower my stress levels.
And I think like that's just, oh my God. Because we're so trained into this like dominance, like must be the leader, always, 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 don't give an inch, like mentality, right? And
I don't think that's
so badly with me for so long, but I'm like, okay, give me something here. Like,
right.
So good. Thank you.
But I believe that dominant leadership is not bad or wrong.
No.
It's the fast horse. So if you want to be a leader and have your horse harmonize with you, you make a decision and they harmonize with your decision. Dominant leadership is willing to take them through intolerance, where they say, no, I don't want to do that. And you keep pushing until they say, yes, I'll do that with you. So it's the fast way to find harmony from a leadership position.
Got it.
I take the slow road, and believe me, it's very slow.
I can imagine.
So there are some horses where I will spend hours, and every step I take, they make a counter move. And that is a horse that is very difficult to help, because they will not let me help them lower their stress. Every time I move, they move. And every time I move, they move. And we can do that for hours. And what they're saying is that I don't trust you enough to make me feel good.
Yeah.
And so what I work with is a system of persistence, where I am being a passive leader and all I'm doing is moving around the horse. They get to move anywhere they want to move, anyhow they want to move, at whatever speed, distance. My job is only to be around them and to make a decision that hopefully is followed by harmony. And the more often that happens, the lower their stress becomes. And the lower their stress becomes, the more they can't wait for me to show up.
Right, because they feel good. They're like,
exactly.
Yeah, this feels awesome to hang out with this person.
Right. And it's not because I gave them a cookie. And it's not because I made them do something. It's just because I showed leadership and I used movement, the movement of my own feet, my own body, to lower their stress levels.
Huh. Wow.
So that's where it starts. And that's where I think the most profound benefits are. I think that there are 3 forms of conversations we have with horses. Passive leadership, which I talk about, I think horses use on us more than we use on them because we don't understand what they're doing. So I think horses actually spend a lot of time lowering human stress levels by taking leadership in a passive way. And it's one of the reasons we love spending time with them. Mm-hmm. So they take a couple of movements and we harmonize with it. And then lo and behold, we feel better. And they do a lot for us. But in order for us to turn that around, we have to learn how to take the last step, take the first step, take the last step, and then find harmony. And see if they're willing to harmonize with us instead of us always harmonizing with them.
Wow.
Now, the opposite side of the spectrum is the dominant leadership, which is I'm willing to make you as uncomfortable as I need to so that we can eventually find harmony together. And that usually involves asking them to move their feet. I want you to do this for me. And that's just another kind of leadership. Now, we have a huge elaborate system of dominant training in the world. And I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's bad. I think some of it's better than others. There's some methods that work better than others, but dominant training is not a bad thing. It's just the faster route. And in dominant training, we use tools so that the horse is able to hold a higher stress level and not leave.
Yes.
Because when the horse feels stressed, they are a flight animal. The first thing they want to do is get out of there and not be with you anymore. So we invented halters and lead ropes so that we can be a leader in a way that makes them profoundly uncomfortable, but they're not allowed to leave until they find comfort again and they're willing to harmonize with us. So I don't like to practice dominant leadership anymore because I feel like there's hundreds and millions of really good trainers out there who are studying it intensely, and they're doing a good job in a lot of ways. I don't think there's enough trainers who are talking about the passive conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think the very best trainers use both conversations. They just don't know how to talk about the passive one.
Yeah, I was going to say this is like literally the first time that I've heard it explained in this way. you know, even the people that are using like liberty techniques and things, I've never heard it explained in this way. And it makes so much sense. Yeah.
What I found is that this thing that I learned with Myrna when I was filming the movie has given me the ability to watch any trainer and sort of see, I can glimpse into why what they're doing is working.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using some conversation that's between dominant and passive. And then in the middle is what I call assertive conversation. An assertive conversation is, I can ask you for something, but if you say no, there's no consequences.
Yes.
And that is a place where you can actually get in a lot of trouble. Because if you repeatedly ask for things from a horse and they say no all the time, you develop a habitual pattern of them saying no, which is not comfortable for anyone.
No.
So all of us have met that human friend where you say, you want to go out for coffee? And they say, no, I don't drink coffee. And you say, well, do you want to go for the movies? And they say, no, I don't really like the movies. Well, how about a walk in the park? No, I don't like going outside. Well, let's just stay here. No, here's boring. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. That is the equivalent of teaching a horse to say no all the time. And so I really encourage people to not work in the assertive conversation until the stress levels are low. So you can use your dominant conversation or your passive conversation to lower stress levels. And then once the horse is in a really good feeling place, then you can go into that assertive conversation where you ask for things and there's no consequence without risking turning your horse into this Scrooge that just says no all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we were having this conversation, you know, before we started, and it was this sense of that I've been like playing with Diva, my mare. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to let go of the reins, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I've been using like hands on her neck to ask her to turn. But then as soon as she like says, no, I didn't want to go that way, I pick up a rein and I'm like, no, we're going that way. So I'm sort of passive until I'm not, I suppose. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, should I be doing that? Or like, you know, I'm so used to this sense, especially like Diva's a very alpha mare. She comes by her name, honestly. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of resistance come up. I think we've both raised each other's stress levels and, you know, thankfully lowered them, I think, more and more and more over the last, you know, 6 or 7 years. But yeah, it was really interesting going, okay, like I'm so used to, you know, when she goes, no, I'm going to do this instead, being like, no, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but that's not bad, because what you're doing is you're using your dominant leadership in a very fair way to lower Diva's stress levels. Because what I find is if you won't take leadership, if you just harmonize with everything Diva wants, you're not helping her at all. Mm-mm. So we have to find ways to make decisions where they can harmonize with us, and that really helps them feel better.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about stress levels, the 3 ways that they become apparent is the coping mechanisms, which is fight, flight, or freeze. So fight is that very simple, you want to turn one way, and she says, no, I'm going the other way. What she's saying is, I feel too stressed to have an assertive conversation with you. And so at that point, you would have to make a decision. Do I become more dominant and pick up my rein? Or do I become more passive and lower her stress levels until she's ready to have that assertive conversation?
Right. Yeah. So it might be like, okay, we'll just go the other way.
Yeah.
A little while longer.
But you have to be careful, because if you do that perpetually, she's going to turn into a horse that every time you ask her to turn left, she has to go right, just because that's the pattern you've trained into her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen that before. And I also see with her, you know, that when I do pick up that rein and say, actually, no, she actually does relax into that. She's like, okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know what I need to do.
Exactly.
Right. Because that's our pattern, right? It's like, okay, like I have choice up until this point where my mom then goes, no, actually, this is what I was asking, you know? And I try to do it in a very fair, like unemotional kind of way, just like, hey, yeah, like channeling. But yeah, very like super interesting. But I noticed even the other day I was working with another horse, and he has a really hard time going to on one rein, right? And we were working at Liberty, and even at a walk, he was having such a hard time staying. And every time he would try to turn the other direction. And I was just like, yeah, let's go there. But let's then go out on the rein so that it's easier for you to hold this other bend. Mm-hmm. And then he was able to hold it. But, you know, I was like, okay, I don't want to get upset with you that you can't hold this, because obviously it's a physical limitation or something, but let's make it easier for you to hold it and build that strength up, you know?
Yeah. So and that's exactly what a good leader does, is they set it up so the answer is likely to be yes.
Yeah. Nice.
Whether you choose to be a little bit dominant and say, actually, this is the way it has to go, let me be really clear about it, or whether you choose to be really passive and say, you know what, I'm going to stand around you and be mindful and breathe and practice stepping at the right time, at the right place, until you feel so good, you go, what should we do? And then I'll tell you what we should do. But that way of doing things that I do when I do a Taming Wilds project is so slow. And I'm not talking slow like hours. I'm talking slow like weeks and months slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And it becomes a real mindfulness meditation process. And it's something that some people are really interested in. And some people say, yeah, 10 minutes is great. And then I'm ready to put my bridle on.
Yeah. And then can I go jump a bunch of shit? You know? Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
My daughter is 15 right now. And she says, Mom, I love your freedom-based training stuff. And I do everything you do. I just do it faster with a bridle on.
Awesome.
So, you know, what I do is not for everyone, but what I find is that what I teach has an aspect of being useful for everyone.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I just had a total deja vu, which is completely meant to be here, everybody. I want to chat with you more about your journey through the filming of the documentary and what that was like, and what, I mean, I haven't seen the documentary yet. Maybe I shouldn't ruin the ending, but like what happened, you know, like how did that process go? And, you know, what did you see happen with that beautiful mare? And yeah.
So I got special permission from the Bureau of Land Management to take her as quickly as possible from the pens. So usually they hold them for 3 or 4 weeks. So they actually, I think it's 6 weeks. So they can vaccinate them twice before they let them go to adopters. And I promised that I would do the second round of vaccinations myself.
Yeah.
If they would let me have her directly. So they rounded her herd up with helicopters because they were starving. Yeah. And they brought them with trailers into the main facility in Burns. And I picked her out and they put her in my trailer the next day.
Wow.
So it was very quick. And what I found about that is that she actually had almost no fear of me right in the beginning. So I was able to touch her on day one. And I was able to take the number from around her neck. And she was really very trusting because nothing horrible had really happened in a way that she could directly associate with people. She had certainly been rounded up by helicopters and chased with flags, but she didn't seem to hold that against me. It was just like a couple of bad days and then it was over. Yeah. So that was the biggest surprise, is that we were able to start right away. And she was really interested in being with me. I adopted her along with another Mustang that a friend of mine picked out so that she would have companionship of another wild horse. Mm-hmm. That, you know, the two of them could be buddies and they didn't have to make friends with the domestic horses unless they wanted to. We brought them into a pen that had 6-foot-high fences because they have to by law.
Yeah.
But they had the domestic horses sort of all around their pen. So they felt like they were in a family group. And then as soon as we were able to, we let them out on the 100 acres with the herd of 20. So the idea is she had all the freedom, all the friends, all the food. And my job was just to be with her and see what she was willing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, maybe I'm going to spend a year sitting in a pasture. And then I'll be like, all right, time for training technique number 2.
It's a gamble, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, nobody's done this before. What's going to happen?
Exactly. And Carolyn Resnick, offered to coach me a little bit, but she really has evolved into this place of doing her training around resource guarding and being able to push horses off of food.
Yes.
And I wanted to take it a step farther than that. I didn't want to push her off of food. I wanted her to have 100 acres of lush grass that, there was nothing I could push her off of.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the progress went very much in leaps and bounds. So we were able to make tons of progress in the first couple of weeks. She was following me around. I was petting her all over. I thought this is going really, really well. And we were able to leave the pen and take walks out in the woods together and come back to the pen, and all sorts of sort of miraculous things happened very, very quickly. And then I decided 3 months in that maybe she was ready for me to start sitting on her.
Yeah.
And I got on her once and she was fine. And I got off her. And the next day I went to get on her and she wouldn't let me get on. And I thought, well, she was eating hay. I mean, we had buckets of hay all scattered through the woods, so there was no shortage of hay. She was eating some hay when I got on the first time. Maybe she didn't really know what I was doing, didn't really think about it until afterwards. And for 3 more months, she wouldn't let me get on.
Wow. And I just want to clarify, you have no halter, no stick, no nothing.
Nothing, no tools whatsoever. And even though she was in a high fenced area, some of the time, the agreement I had with her was I would always be closer to the fence than she was. So she always had more room to move away from me than I had room to pressure her.
Wow.
So for 3 months, I know so much more now. I think, there's a whole bunch of things that I would have done differently that would have changed that, but that's how this goes.
Totally.
So for 3 months I tried to get on, and for 3 months she just kept walking away because, she didn't really have to do much other than that. She just walk away and I'd be like, all right, I don't get to get on again.
Yeah.
So there's your sort of conversation, teaching horse to say no, repeat.
And you're like, and I have nothing to create a dominant conversation around this. Wow.
And I didn't understand my passive conversation enough to really understand what I was doing. So I just sort of blindly groped my way through it. And when you watch the movie, you'll laugh because that's, you'll see me blindly groping my way through it. And when I teach workshops now, I say, now you can go back and watch the movie and see all the mistakes I made, because that's how you learn, is by making mistakes.
Absolutely.
About 6 months into the project, she started letting me ride. And it was just a little bit at a time. We built it up really gradually, and eventually we could trot, and then we could canter. And then it turns out she was pregnant and she had a foal. And then there were 3 of us in this project.
Oh my gosh.
And so we just continued on, and we just built up every communication skill we could with this idea that I really believe horses crave companionship and harmony.
Mm-hmm.
But they also crave feeling better. And feeling better comes from having somebody make good decisions around you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could make really good decisions around Myrna so that she felt like she could trust me, then that harmony and companionship had a whole new depth to it. And so my job was to be enough of a leader in a passive way or an assertive way so that she would feel good enough that she would want to do things and try the next thing with me.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were first riding out on the trails, we would go and look around the corner 15 or 20 times because she didn't want to go any farther. So every day we would go to that same spot in the trail and we'd peek around the corner. And then we'd go back to somewhere else, play with the herd again. And then the next day we'd go out and we'd peek around the corner again. And 20 times later, she would go, I'm kind of curious what's around that corner. And I'm like, all right, well, let's go see.
Wow. I admire your patience so much. it's so beautiful. I mean, like really, to just be willing to go out every day and go, okay, what's going to show up today? You know, I
Yeah.
mean, like seriously, the epitome of not having an agenda, really, you know.
Oh, I had a big agenda.
Tell
I was filming a
me about
movie.
that. Tell us about that.
I was filming a movie and I needed a grand finale. I needed something really miraculous. I had set this year-long project. I was going to do a year, and then I was going to have something miraculous happen at the end. And I didn't know what it would be. And at the very beginning, I said, wouldn't it be great if we could gallop on the beach through the waves, bareback and bridleless, having never used any means of force? And I thought, yeah, but that's impossible. That's too big an ask. But we did it. We did 12 months of no tools whatsoever. And then in the 13th month, I taught her to wear a halter because we needed to take an 11-hour drive in the trailer to get to the beach location where we were going to film the grand finale. And the thing that was really important about my project is the reason I could use no dominance and use no tools is I was never in an unsafe place.
Yes.
I was always in a place where there was no physical danger to Myrna or myself.
Yeah.
And so I always had time to say, well, let's see what happens. But when I went on that 11-hour trailer ride to the beach and I was in a place that was very different than our home, she needed to learn to wear a halter, specifically when we were around cars.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I still was able to ride bareback and bridleless on the beach and do most of my training without a halter. But anytime we were in a situation where she might run into traffic, she needed to wear a halter and be on a lead rope with me. So that's really important to me that I impart that to people, is that horses don't always know how to make the right decisions in a human environment. And we need to make sure that we set them up for success so they don't get hurt. And if that means being a little dominant, that's what it means.
Absolutely. I think it's so big to share because I mean, they're living in a human world, right? And I always felt that with Diva, and I say that with other horses, it's like, you know, you never know, like what if Diva has to go to another home?
Yeah.
She has to be able to like take direction or right. Yeah. There's situations where it really matters that she listens, you know, and yeah, that's wonderful. So when like, I watched the grand finale with like in the trailer, like clips up, right? And I was like, oh my God, like, oh my God. That was kind of, it just blew my mind to see, like, because I could feel the openness. It was like, there's no fences, there's no, you know, like, and so, you know, what were the steps that were, like, how did you know that you were ready for that?
It's just came from months and months and months of being, you know, really confident that she wanted to be with me more than she wanted to be anywhere else. And not all of it was smooth sailing. Actually, a really funny story. We actually filmed the movie 5 years before we made the movie. 4 years. Because I ran out of money after we filmed.
Right.
And I had no money to finish it. And I put all the footage on a shelf for 4 years. And then I met somebody who was happy to help me finish it. And I ran a Kickstarter and I raised the money and we actually made the movie. So 4.5 years after the movie was filmed, we went back to the same beach to do a photo shoot for the movie. And Myrna and I are standing next to each other, knee deep in the waves, and the waves are crashing over us and we're having a great time. And she's got no halter on, I've got no ropes, nothing there. And a big, huge wave comes over and drenches us. So we're just so wet. I mean, she's drenched, I'm drenched. And she looks at me and she's like, we gotta go. And I was like, no, it's just one wave. We're good. We're good. And she looked at me and she was like, no, we really have to go. And she gave me like 3 chances of saying, we have to go. And I was really stubborn. I was like, no, we're doing a photo shoot. We got to stay in the waves. And finally she was like, I'm sorry, I have to go then. And she took off at a flat out gallop down the beach. Now this is 40 some miles of open beach on the west coast of Washington State. And I'm watching my horse disappear as a little dot down the beach. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a really bad movie if I've lost my horse.
My God.
And then she turned around and she came galloping back to me, and she galloped circles around me until she calmed herself down enough. And then she came back in and we started again. And I said, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. You're right. We shouldn't have stayed in the waves any longer after that big one got us all wet.
Wow. Oh my God. I can only imagine like your heart sinking at that moment.
Yeah. And luckily the photographer was there and he just kept taking pictures the whole time. We have these great pictures.
One way or the other, we're capturing this.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Amazing.
So not all is smooth sailing in the world of freedom-based training, because ultimately, if they think you're making really bad decisions, they have the freedom to say, I'm sorry, I gotta go. Your decisions are not working for me. And that happens remarkably little. I'm actually very, very surprised how seldom that happens. I would say Myrna ran off from me probably a total of 4 times in the entire 13 months of the movie project.
Wow.
And every time she came back. And every time I knew I had been making remarkably bad decisions. And she just had to make it clear that that wasn't working for her.
Totally.
So, you know, what I train is not blind obedience. And if you want blind obedience, you're probably going to have to use some dominant training. If you want a real partnership, well, then freedom-based training might be real interesting for a lot of people.
It sounds like that's the case. If we can get you anywhere nearby for a workshop in the next 4 years. Oh my goodness. Elsa was telling me before the call that she's booked until 2020.
Well, part of that is because I have 2 more movies to film.
Oh my goodness. Tell us about that.
So I have a good friend in Costa Rica who's taken my online course a number of times, and she brought up this idea for a project that she wanted to do, and she asked me if I wanted to do it with her, and I said, absolutely. We're going to adopt 2 rescue horses that have no chance.
Going to ask about that. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're adopting.
It's one thing to have Myrna, who's really not had negative experience with people and is pretty fresh and blank slate. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of the coin, right? Where they're like, they've got stuff. They've got, yeah.
So this is a training mission for me to work with a horse that has baggage, a horse that everybody else has given up on. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 weeks to traverse from the west coast to the east coast of Costa Rica. We're going to trek from one side of the country to the other with these 2 horses. And the idea is we're going to train as we go. Now, it can't be in total freedom because we can't lose them in the jungle. They're going to need to wear halters for this, but I'm going to use everything that I understand and everything that I know to help them get a new start on life, a new foot forward, so that when we get to the east coast of Costa Rica, they are in a different mind state where they're really ready for their new family and their new partnerships to have a really good life.
That's beautiful.
So it's going to be a training movie. It's going to be an adventure movie. We're going to be trekking through the jungle. Thankfully, we found a really good cameraman who's willing to trek through the jungle after us with the video camera.
Nice one. Yes, that's important. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the month of February will be devoted to that. And then if anybody's interested, I'll be holding a week-long workshop in Costa Rica after I finish filming the movie. So you could get me full of all sorts of fresh inspiration.
Wow.
Discovery Horse Tourist does an amazing job of setting up a place for people to come in and do a workshop. So that's happening the last week of February.
And is that info on your website, Elsa?
Yes, it is on my website.
Okay. And is it on the Taming Wild website? Is that?
Yes, Taming Wild.
Okay.
TamingWild.com is where you find the list of workshops.
Wonderful. And what's the other project?
So after I finish with Costa Rica, I get to go to Australia and New Zealand and teach, and then I get to go to Europe and teach for a bunch of weeks, and then I will be coming back to get organized for the summer, and then in August, I will go get 2 more horses, and I will film on the site that I filmed Taming Wild with Myrna. But these 2 horses are going to be a contrast to each other. So one of them will be wild off the range and will be a fresh, clean slate. And the other one will be a rescue horse from an organization. And it'll be a horse that does not like people, that does not want anything to do with people, that has baggage and history, and who I really have to develop something new with. And I'm devoted to putting in exactly the same amount of hours with each horse, so you can really see the compare and contrast of their journeys.
Wow.
Now, because I, like to keep it interesting, they're both going to be stallions.
Oh my goodness.
And they're going to live together. And because I think that in this country in particular, we think that stallions are dangerous and can't live together and are not safe. And I'd love to shed a little light on some other possibilities there. So we're going to see how that goes.
Wow. You are stretching yourself, girl. I love it.
So the idea is that my training method is so slow and it's so quiet. And I do not want to be pushed to make it exciting to make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I want to let my training be as slow and as quiet as it needs to be. And the idea of doing it with stallions is they're going to have their own testosterone-driven communications with each other. And hopefully they can be the exciting part of the movie. And I can be the calming, relaxing, easy part of the movie.
Meditative part of the movie. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I love it. Wow.
So with those 2 horses, I will again do a full year. I'll do a year of whatever it is that we can do with them. And I'm really committed to every horse is an individual, and I am not a miracle worker. So if I spend a year sitting in a pasture with 2 horses and there is no movie, there is no movie. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to turn this into another dominant training movie because there's lots of people out there doing that really well. There's not enough people asking the passive question. And that's what I want to do.
I love it. Wow, man.
So we'll see.
Such a great conversation. I can't wait. And I'm sort of weirdly thinking about Costa Rica, so we'll see. I've always wanted to go.
It would be so much fun to see you there.
Right? Yeah, I'm just so amazed by your work, Elsa, and I agree. I have never seen anybody else really like fully asking the passive question. I've seen people dabble and go in and out and things, but to really like go what is possible here without any of that stuff is unprecedented in the horse industry, and I think absolutely necessary at this point where even in this program, it was really my inspiration or intention to like shed light on this area of things and to be an advocate for horses and different ways of being with horses that we may not have thought about before. And like this is just like so bang on to what we're all about here, and I think why a lot of us came to be in this program and how a lot of us want to be with our horses. So yeah, I'm like very, very moved by the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to open up the line to everybody to ask questions. So if you guys can start to kind of percolate on some questions that you might have for Elsa, and we'll just keep chatting if there isn't one, but you can either pop it in the chat box below, or I'll unmute the line and you can ask it on there. In fact, we have quite a few of us on the line, so if you have a question, why don't you just pop your name in the chat box and I'll unmute you. And then it'll be easier than having all the background noise and kind of trying to figure out who's chatting. Yeah. Anybody have a question?
We guess you could just keep chatting then.
We'll just chat, and yeah, if someone has a question, pop it in the chat box, or pop your name in the chat box. All right. So, and me and Elsa will just keep chatting because I feel like we could chat for a long time about all this stuff. And one of the things I asked you a little bit before we started recording here, Elsa, was around this idea of, and I'm thinking this must be a kind of a highly in the dominant spectrum situation, where I'd seen this particular video of a trainer who was laying a horse down and was using, a big long rope and, a stick and various things. And it was so interesting because I was watching the horse and I was seeing that stress physiology. And I was also reading the comments section below the video and going, like it was like, a little bit of, I think, a reflection of the horse industry at this moment, where people don't really know how to have the conversation. It was like one person would be like, wow, that's really cool. You're laying your horse down, and another would be like, this is the most terrible thing I've ever seen. This horse is suffering brutally. And then the next would be like, that's cool. And, like, it was like the whole conversation. And then, of course, the infighting between these groups who are like, you don't know what you're talking about. And you don't know, like, it was this really, I was like, is this a microcosm to like what's happening in other places? And what I realized reading the comments was like, nobody really had good answers for why or why not to do this particular thing, right? Yeah. They knew what they were feeling maybe, or what had been done in the past, but it wasn't like, this is something that we might want to consider around the stress response, and that there's these different types of leadership, and if, like there's different ways of asking a horse to do this particular thing. So, yeah. Oh, Coral, where is your chat? Oh, right. Oh, yes. Yeah, good question. So there's that, Coral was asking about the video of that interesting Argentinian man who like sits on his horse and stretches him out. And do you know the one that I'm talking about?
I do, yes.
Yeah,
I know that video.
Went viral. It went viral. And I remember seeing it too, Coral, and being like, I don't know how to feel about this. What would be some insight into that, Elsa, from kind of your perspective of what you've learned?
So my perspective is that that horse looked like it was quite content doing what it was doing with the person. And the question that comes to mind is, how much intolerance did they have to push through to get there?
Yeah.
And is that reasonable? And I'm not going to be able to answer that. Everybody's going to have their own answer for, is that reasonable? Because I certainly know a lot of well cared for horses that don't look that content. But does the ends justify the means?
Absolutely.
And that is an impossible question to answer for someone else. You have to answer it for yourself.
Completely. Because I mean, I know for myself, I've, I think we all have heard the stories of like, what happens behind the scenes of this particular trainer, and that, you know what I mean? And I think when you're talking about the memes, it's like that sort of is a part of it. It's like, we don't necessarily know what the steps were to get to here, Yeah.
And I believe that there's really positive ways to do it. And I believe there's also really subversive ways to do it, that both of them can end up to a place where the horse is really quite content. And then you just have to question, what did they have to live through to get to that place of contentment?
Yeah.
And I don't have a right answer, but I do believe that horse that is ultimately very content is better off than the horse that is pampered and spoiled and hates everyone for their whole life.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I could see that. Now, one of the things that I get stuck on here is working on horses and doing equine therapy, and I meet horses that are like what I call robots, right? Their spirit has been quote unquote broken, and they're like, what do you need me to do? I'll just do that, like kind of like zombies, So like, it feels like in those horses that a line has been very much crossed in them, something in them. And I know for horses, one of their survival responses is, for example, in laying down, that they'll literally go into this like, oh, I died.
Yep.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
I died and now I'm in another place.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, but I'm moving forward, not as necessarily my whole being,
Yeah.
but as something different. Is that something that you've kind of seen or?
Absolutely. And I think that it has to do with the quality of dominant training. So training is all about timing and feel. When do you put the pressure on? When do you take the pressure off? When do you move your feet? When do you keep your feet still? When do you harmonize? When do you make a new decision? And the thing about dominant training is everything happens very fast. And so it's really easy to get it wrong. And every horse is unique. So you may get it perfectly right with 50 horses, and then the 51st horse is so different that your timing is terrible, and you end up turning that horse into some sort of a robot in some portion of itself because you didn't have the timing to really help it actually feel better.
Mm-hmm.
You only had the timing to make it look like it felt better.
Thank you, Elsa, for this incredible sharing and amazing content. If you'd like to find more about Elsa Sinclair, head to www.tamingwild.com or check out her documentary and her upcoming documentary, Taming Wild Pura Vida. The Kickstarter campaign is on now, and she'll be filming in Costa Rica in February. That concludes our time together today. Thank you for making it this far and taking the time out of your day. I know we're all very busy. We'll be continuing on with more incredible guests, and I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.